Ever since hints started coming out that the prototype might actually have the appearance of a jester rather than being the monstrosity made of metal and decaying body parts everyone thought it would be, the community has been very divided. Not only on the debate on whether the prototype is actually a jester-like creature, but also debating on whether the prototype, the overarching and main villain of Puppy Playtime, should actually have the appearance of a jester. These topics have gotten pretty big, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger as more gets revealed about the prototype in the lead up to chapter 5. So in this video, I'll be going over why a jester prototype might not actually be a bad thing and how it could make sense in the story. But to make this all make sense, let's go over why the prototype may or may not be a jester. By being a jester, I really just mean that the prototype's upper body is a jester in some way. Whether it be he's wearing a jester costume or his entire upper body is just one big jester toy. Not that he acts like a jester, because we know his personality is nothing like one. In the 2025 Christmas artwork, there were 2 pictures on the wall that reference tarot cards. These cards have their own meaning, which isn't relevant for this video, but what's important here is their designs. The first tarot card, the 10 of Swords, closely resembles the original tarot card, with the only change really being the colouring. However, the other tarot card, the Fool, has a lot of changes compared to its original design. The background is the Playtime factory, the person is holding a poppy flower, and most notably, they have a whole new outfit. It would be so easy to brush it off as simply customizing the tarot card to fit the theme of Poppy Playtime, but this is just taking it to a whole new level. The design of the clothing, in my opinion, could easily be modified to fit Poppy Playtime. Just replace the yellow flowers with poppy flowers and maybe tweak the colouring a little bit. But to go and design a whole new outfit just for a small cameo in a holiday artwork is too much for it just to be a reference to the meaning behind the original tarot card. So it's definitely a reference to a character that will appear in chapter 5. Head to the right side of the artwork and we see who this jester character fits the most. That's right, the prototype. The fitting white sleeves on the jester's forearm could represent the prototype's forearms made of bones. And the puffy yellow sleeves line up perfectly with the jester's puffy yellow sleeves. More proof of jester prototype comes in the New Year's artwork some days later. Once the image is brightened, we can see the next part of the prototype sleeve is blue, just like the jester's. Not to mention that the prototype is also holding a poppy flower in its left hand just like the jester is, in very similar poses where they're holding the stem with the index finger and thumb. It's becoming more and more clear that the tarot jester's design is a reference to the prototype's design. And lastly, our final piece of evidence for now came from the prototype's own trailer. In the shot where the prototype is holding up a scalpel, the reflection is highly believed to be his face, where we can see 2 holes where the eyes would be and a slit where the mouth would be. But another, and equally accepted outlook many people had on this is that the reflection is the yellow part of the jester's hat, mainly because it's yellow, and the fact that its shape contorts at the bottom and has a little sphere at the end, despite the scalpel itself not contorting as well to form this shape if it really was the prototype's head. So when we put all of this proof together, the sleeves, the bones, the flower, and the jester hat reflection, I feel like it's more likely that the prototype is a jester. This discovery came with a lot of backlash. Many people are worried that the jester appearance would make the prototype look silly rather than scary. And it wouldn't make sense for the prototype, the game's main villain who's supposed to be a terrifying experiment made of metal and bones for Playtime Co.'s research, to take on a toy-like appearance. And yeah, I truly get why people are worried about it, but there's a lot that could be said that would make the prototype being a jester make a lot of sense. Now before you raise your pitchforks at me, please hear me out because I have quite a few points that would support this. My first point is that a jester prototype can be absolutely terrifying if it's done right. In gaming right now, jesters are a pretty popular character trope, and I've personally noticed that this character trope is starting to make its way into horror. This is thanks to the fact that jesters are pretty much the old version of a character trope that's already very, very famous in horror and has been for years. In fact, this type of character had our entire generation terrified to even go outside 10 years ago. That's right, I'm talking about clowns. Clowns in horror are genuinely terrifying, and that's because they're easy to make terrifying thanks to regular clowns already looking pretty unsettling. With all of this, I'm very confident that if the prototype is a jester, it will look very scary. I understand that the idea of a jester prototype sounds pretty silly compared to what we originally thought it would be, but I don't think it makes it any less valid as a scary design. It just makes it sound less gross. This is definitely going to be one of those trust the process things. I mean, just look at some of these new fan designs of the prototype since the Jester hint started coming out. They are so freaking cool and terrifying, and strangely, it makes me glad that the prototype is going to be a Jester. While we're on the topic of these old fan expectations of the prototype's full appearance, my second point is that the gist of these designs aren't fully lost. When I read a lot of the negative opinions on the Jester prototype, there's one thing I see a lot of people say, that they were expecting a monster only made of metal, flesh and bones, that the prototype was making his body off of random mechanical things he can find and dead people in the aftermath of the Hour of Joy. But I'm here to say that the prototype can very easily be both a Jester and the monster made of corpses and metal that the community has yearned for, where his physical body is made of metal, flesh and bones, but on top of that he's wearing a Jester hat and a Jester outfit. I think a huge misconception a lot of people had is that in order for the prototype to be a Jester, the Jester part of his body has to be made purely out of toy materials. But I think that this is the least likely option if the prototype is going to be a Jester. Looking back at the tarot card image that has a striking resemblance to the new glimpses we got of the prototype, the white sleeves represent the forearms made of bones, and the hands are bare in the image despite the prototype's hands being made of metal. So if we look at the head, the character is only wearing a Jester hat and has a human head. Therefore the entire head is likely not part of a Jester toy appearance but rather something made of metal or body parts, but merely wearing a Jester hat on top of it. This is what I think the most likely option is, going off of what the Jester photo itself implies about the prototype already, and the notion that the prototype is using anything it can to continue building its body. We know that the prototype is huge, so I'm thinking that he uses human body parts wherever possible, then everything else is made of metal or other toy materials to make himself bigger. But that raises a whole new question. Why exactly does the prototype feel the need to wear a costume, let alone a Jester costume? After all, he would be able to function perfectly in his body without the costume. So let's look at the prototype's personality and goals. We know that the prototype is a manipulative liar. He tricked the other experiments into committing a massacre against all the workers by telling them they'd finally be free from their torment, only to find out that the prototype won't let them leave and they ultimately have to fend for their own survival within the now abandoned factory. Turns out the prototype orchestrated the Hour of Joy so he could roam freely and achieve the scientific goal he's been wanting to work on, whatever it may be, that could be revealed in Chapter 5. So how does this relate to the Jester outfit? Well, remember the whole deal with the toy civil war and the safe haven? The prototype is seemingly desperate, despite his tough facade. I think at some point, in an attempt to enter the safe haven, the prototype disguised himself as a toy. Of course, Dowie and the others saw right through it and knew it was the prototype. As the toy war took place in 1997, only 2 years after the Hour of Joy and 8 years before Poppy Playtime takes place, the costume would have been very worn down by the time we arrive. So to clear something up, you know how I said the prototype is probably not entirely a Jester and still has a visible body outside of it? Well, for that to make sense with this theory, we can assume that the prototype's costume withered away over the years and he spent that time repairing his body with other parts, giving him the appearance of a grotesque mixture of a Jester and a creature made of metal and flesh. Anyways, the prototype's Jester costume being very worn down, despite being pretty colourful and bright, which is something people don't really appreciate in horror games, is very akin to Chapter 3's aesthetic, which is something fans appreciated a lot. Chapter 3 is by far the fan favourite chapter, and Playcare's aesthetic is very popular for being colourful as it's a kid's place, yet somewhat dull after everything that happened there. So I'm saying that the colourfulness of the prototype's Jester appearance may be like the personification of Chapter 3, and therefore another reason why I don't think the Jester thing will ruin the prototype. I know I went on a bit of a tangent, but the last thing I want to say about the prototype's choice in making himself a Jester is that he specifically chose a Jester because it feels like the complete opposite of how he is normally. If we're going by my theory that he disguised himself at some point, disguising himself as something that his personality has absolutely zero resemblance to at all, since Jesters are silly and fun but the prototype is scary and serious, it's the irony of it that goes well together, which is also why I think Mob went down this route. So after all that speculating, let's see what those who have seen the prototype have to say. A few weeks ago, one of the devs, Spence, said that he thinks that the prototype's official design is better than most of the old fan designs. Another dev a while ago, Amber, said that the prototype is her second favourite design in the entire franchise so far, behind Mummy Longlegs. Of course, these two statements are just opinions, and we know that the devs can sometimes have pretty different opinions to the rest of the community. But I'm personally gonna trust their judgment, just because I really have nothing against the prototype being a jester, and these two developers are more on the creative side of Poppy Playtime's development, who started off as creators making fan content of the game. So I think that in the end, the prototype's jester design will look great, despite it not being what we had originally thought it would be. So with that being said, you guys, my own verdict is that a jester design for the prototype might actually be pretty cool. Not only does it add more personality to the prototype outside of being a beast whose only thoughts mainly consist of violence and experimentation, but the design alone could add more lore to the prototype's decisions. And if you are worried about it not looking scary, I'm pretty confident that no matter how silly looking Mob might accidentally make it, it won't be enough to truly make this absolute monstrosity not scary.